Welcome to the Break and Enter podcast with Jahan, Kalantar and
Traci, Chen.
This is our new and exciting podcast where two lawyers from very different worlds talk about the stuff that they have in common. And Traci, I am so excited to talk to you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
It's our pleasure. I like to think that the stroke of genius that will define you and me is that we came up with the name Break and Enter.
We did. And it was all one night when we first met each other.
That's right.
At a random house party in South Coogee, was it?
It was South Coogee, yeah.
And Jahan comes up to me and he's like, do you want to do a podcast? I was like, yeah. It literally took this guy like 30 seconds and he's like, Break and Enter. That'll be the name of the podcast.
I think that's the smartest thing I've ever come up with because...
my mind was blown.
Oh, look, you know, you've got the vivacious charm, the genius, the wit, and I've got a great stash. So, like, together we're going to absolutely knock this out. So this episode's called Why Us? Because we know, dear listener or watcher, that you have access to the entire panoply of the internet of things to watch and listen to. And if you decided to give us your attention, we kind of want to explain why that might be the case. And I think it's probably a good idea, if you don't mind me asking, Traci, tell me your story. Tell me a little bit about how you came to be the migration lawyer in Australia. How did you become that person?
All right. So I am an immigrant myself. I came to Australia when I was 2 years old. I came here in 1992. I came here with my mum. So when my mum actually fell pregnant, my dad already came to Australia. And times were very different then, and this was the early 90s. And he had to come here to study and obviously set up a life here for us. So for the first 2 years, I actually hadn't met my dad. And it wasn't until I first arrived in 1992 that I first met my father. Now, he did masters and a PhD here in Australia, and then we settled in South Australia, and that's where I've always grown up. So I went to primary school, high school in South Australia, and I studied law at Flinders University. It's very interesting how I got into the law. I think at that time, you know, when you're growing up with, let's say Asian parents, they want you to be a doctor, lawyer, or, engineer maybe.
No, we have a similar, in Iranian culture, you're a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure.
That's right. Everything else
those
is
are your
second-class
options.
citizen.
If you do anything else, you've lost. Yet, I'm feeling this. Please continue.
Okay, so, and then at the time, I'm super scared of blood. I don't know about you, but I can't handle that stuff.
It's horrible.
I don't know how people do it.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
I don't... yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, well then I'll just do the law. So I studied law at Flinders University, and at that time I didn't know what area of law I wanted to do. And I think when you first start the law and when you're like a budding university student, I think the criminal law is always really cool. You're like, whoa,
I didn't want to say anything.
And I
you're
like, whoa, I want to be a criminal lawyer. But somehow when I graduated, I ended up being in immigration law, and it's something that I understood very well because our family, we are migrants, and I understand the situation very well. I understand how clients feel, and so that's how I kind of ended up in immigration law. And then what happened was I continued working for a few different firms in South Australia, and then I moved to Melbourne to work. I was working for different firms, and then this is taking us to 2019 now.
Yep.
Then to 2020, I started working at a global immigration firm, and things were going great. I really wanted the challenge. Moving to a bigger firm was very exciting. But then obviously COVID hit during that time.
Yeah, wow.
And that, I don't know about other areas of law and other industries, but that hit migration really hard, especially with the global immigration firms, because all they did was bring in overseas workers. So one, Australian businesses didn't want to hire anymore because they weren't sure what was happening. The businesses had to shut down for that period. And then secondly, you can't even get people in. So that was the second thing. So that's where it went all terribly wrong. So I was part of a group of people who were let go. So I was in that job for I think 5 months. And I was let go. I was lucky I lined up another job at a more suburban law firm, and they were looking to grow their immigration area.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, cool, I'll go in and we'll just see how it goes. And I started off part-time. And when we started, they're like, all right, cool, we have our network here, but you go find the clients. I was like, okay, cool. I'm up for the challenge. And then at that time, that's when everything on TikTok started, blowing up. And I found it really interesting. And I actually first I heard of it, but then I saw it, advertised on Channel 7. I was like, oh, this is cool. There's like a lot of advertising for it. So I jumped on, and then I obviously fell down that rabbit hole. I was watching hours and hours of TikToks every day in lockdown, as you do. Pretty sure I came across a couple of your TikToks at the beginning as well. And then I was like, okay, well, I want to practice, because you watch these TikToks about how you can get better and better, so that you have to find a topic that you can talk about every single day. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just talk about migration. So I did that. And what I realized was that there was actually a lot of people stuck in Australia. And I was Googling the numbers. There's over 2 million people in Australia on temporary visas.
Sheesh.
And that was like a 2020 number. I don't know how much it is now, because in 2023, when they opened up the borders, they let something like 500,000 people into Australia.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's obviously continuing to grow. So at that time, obviously, I was able to gain a pretty good following, because there was a lot of people stuck in Australia, a lot of people apart from people in Australia and trying to figure out how to get to Australia or stay in Australia. People didn't want to go back either. And so the following started to grow. And, I think at that time, no one really knew. It was kind of uncharted territory. What do you do with these people calling every day? What do you do with these people, sending queries in? The law firm probably didn't have the capacity or the ability to service all these leads or know what to do with it. But I saw an opportunity there. So then I was like, okay, cool. I'll just start my own. And that's how we are today. I started Mason Chen Law Group. And now we have, I think it's 65 employees.
Wow.
Yeah, we're just hitting 3 years in July.
You have killed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It.
Yeah.
I am in love with this. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know what you are? You're a migrant success story.
You think?
I'm sure. That story was so good, it made me lean back in my chair. And
go all the way backwards.
I'm just blown away. That's amazing. It's so funny because there's a lot of parallels between your story and mine. So
yes, tell me your story, please.
So I too am a first generation Australian. I came when I was 2 as well. My parents came from Iran to Australia. Iran had a lot of political unrest. There was a war and whatnot, and they came here. And growing up in Australia in the late 80s, early 90s was a very different place. Like multiculturalism was not a thing. I remember being, I think, probably the only brown person in my school, or somebody who had like an unusual... I am brown. The fun fact about Australia is I've noticed you're either white or not. Like there is,
I'm not. I'm yellow.
Yeah, but I don't think that there's... I think the delineation is very clear here, where it's not necessarily the case in other parts of the world. And so I was like, my parents, they spoke English and they were educated, but all of their qualifications, all of that, they had to rebuild. And so we were really kind of at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. My parents were working odd jobs and studying at the same time, because even though they were qualified overseas to practice medicine, they weren't qualified here. And about when I was, I think it was 10, 11, 12, they finally got their accreditation. And all of a sudden, we had this huge jump socioeconomically, because there's a big difference in what a doctor makes versus, what a student makes. And I just remember people started treating us different. And that never sat right with me. There was something about that experience that really irked me, that one day I was treated better, not because of any change in my character, but because of this thing called money. And I thought, I don't like that, and that's something I don't really want to deal with. And similar to you, I was told you can be a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. Like those are your 3 options. And I went to business school. So I firstly, I guess, believed very much that, okay, what I can do is I can make tons and tons of money and I can give it away and help other people so that they don't feel the way that I felt. That was kind of my first approach to this. And I turned out to be a horrific business person. I was bad at it. I worked at banks. I was sucked at it. And I kind of decided when the GFC hit, I'm going to go reskill. And that's when I became a lawyer. So I've got a couple more years under my belt in the legal game. I was admitted in 2013. I practiced as a barrister for a few years before opening my practice. And we've always been a very driven social enterprise. That being said, you have to make a living. But we're much smaller than you. We're about, I think, 12 to 15 employees. We've been around for 10 years. But the reason that I kind of blew up is very similar to you. So New South Wales's response to the pandemic was terrible. It was objectively a bad response. What would happen is every day we'd have this press conference at 11 a.m. The Premier would come out and basically say, hey, bunch of people are dead. Bunch of people are sick. Here's a new law. Peace, and leave. And it was awful. And at the time, I had more staff back then. We make our money really when cases close. I didn't feel right charging a client when I'm not doing any work. So I'm sitting there with this huge staff that I owe a lot of money to. I don't know what to do. Courts are closed. And I decided what I'll do is I'll write an explanation of a public health order. And I sat down and I wrote a very detailed step-by-step piece of advice on how public health orders work. And I put it up, I think, on LinkedIn or some other channels. And like 30 people read it. No one cared. And this thing called TikTok was blowing up. And I said, well, why don't I just share that on TikTok? And I basically did a piece to camera. And I got like 100 followers in a day. And I was like, whoa.
Insane.
Because to get a follower on Insta and Facebook is like pulling, like to get 100 followers, I might as well, I don't know what you got to do, dance naked. Yeah, buy them. And so to get 100 on TikTok was crazy. And so I had nothing else to do. And I just kept getting on TikTok. And slowly over time, I've developed a following for explaining the law really, really well. And I think for me, what it's really educated me on is people are hungry for knowledge. Like, have you felt that as well?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But they want it simplified too. And that's what the beauty of TikTok, because we were forced to make 15 to 30-second videos.
That's right.
So we're forced to simplify the law and explain it to our viewers.
And as a lawyer, particularly by way of training, you're taught you want to write like a 20-page advice, and then you say, if this is the case, then that is the case. But the reality is, for most people, you want to simplify it sufficiently to give them at least a direction to walk in and help them if they need it. The reality is, I think that information should be free and available. If you want execution, come to me. I'll do it for you.
Exactly.
But I'm giving you the information for free because I think you should have it.
Exactly.
I'm not the gatekeeper of wisdom. And I think that what I really thought when I was younger was that people didn't care about the law. Now I understand they care very deeply. They just didn't know.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. And if you don't get onto TikTok and tell them the information, they even never knew that this or that was even possible.
Absolutely.
That was the beauty of
and
social media.
And I think that, particularly, I'm sure your practice is the same. We're very different practice areas, but at the end of the day, I'm dealing with an individual. I'm dealing with a human being,
Yes.
right?
And you got to remember that.
And at the end of the day, they have a face, they have a soul, they have a experience, and I really want to make sure that I walk them through this journey with dignity, with respect, and shepherd them to the best of my experience. And that's what I love about my area of the law, that I deal with people. What's your favorite part of the area of the law you're in?
I think definitely yes. And I think the bigger picture of everything that I do, whether it's in the immigration law or as a employer, as a CEO, it's about changing people's lives in one way or the other.
Yeah.
And that's what motivates me every single day, in whatever context it should be.
I like that. And so you have now learned why you should be following the Break and Enter podcast with the wonderful
Traci Chen
and the amazing Jahan Kalantar. Stay tuned. We're going to be bringing out episodes fairly regularly. They're going to be about this size. They're going to be topic based. If you have any questions or ideas, please let us know. We're really excited to share this with you. Thank you for being on this journey with me, Traci.
Thank you. I feel so motivated already.
I feel pumped.
I'm a different person. Yeah.
See you guys.